If you characterise spring, you get lovely sunny days like today. We're sitting in a t-shirt. At 7 o'clock tonight, it'll be freezing cold and we may have grass frost by tomorrow morning. So you're getting, warm days, cold nights. So although Mother Nature is, the fish will definitely be responding to that and light levels have increased, it's bright, but the water temperature is still cold. Some of the very best carp baits straight off the supermarket shelf. Sweet corn is quite salty. Bread is quite salty. Now people say bread's not salty, but actually if you look at the salt content of bread, it's some breads that you buy from the supermarket are more salty than ready salted crisps. If you're that little parasite on the fish's flank and you get rammed into clay, it could just suck you straight off, but it will certainly clag up your ability to breathe and then you've let go.
Where's a carp likely to take zigs out of the equation? We'll get onto those in a little while. Where's a carp likely to want to feed after dark? Where's that happy?
I would say in the deeper water.
Drop back down into that cold water.
Yeah, I would say in the deeper water.
And would that not be colder than the shallow water?
Well, again, it depends on the day and the mixing. Yeah. If we get big winds, then it can change the whole thing. So, look for signs of fish. Definitely. At first light, be watching the water like a hawk. And if you're seeing fish showing over deep water, that's probably where they spent the night. One thing I would say, and you often see fish showing quite a lot in the springtime, is that the carp's ability to deal with its parasites builds up slower than the activity of the parasites in the spring. So fish parasites get a bit of a head start on the fish in the spring. Now, if you're a carp and you've got, let's say, some argillus, some fish lice on you, or leeches, or skin flukes, those parasites are becoming quite active as the water starts to creep up, and they get active before the fish. And so the fish can be quite irritated, and you'll see fish showing quite a lot. That doesn't mean they're tearing at the bottom, it means they're scratchy. And we'll see it on the farm, and you see it in tanks or ponds of fish, that they become quite agitated in the spring. Often the mucus is there's quite a lot of mucus on the fish, and that is a response to those parasites. And if they're jumping a lot on the surface, they're probably trying to knock off parasites, or flanking, like when I say rubbing on the bottom.
Rubbing, yeah.
And they're trying to knock off parasites. Obviously those are really useful indicators of where the fish are, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're tearing the bottom to pieces, they're just agitated.
Yeah, I always use in the spring, when you start to hear those boshes, the ones that to me, that is like, right, the carp in this lake now are
fully awake.
Yeah, they're not drifting about lazily anymore. When they're doing that,
they're active.
And that is, like you say, that's clean.
Head and shouldering. If I see fish just poking their nose out and dropping back in a few bubbles, that's feeding fish.
That's feeding. But
when they're coming out and going bang, they're trying to knock parasites off.
They're trying to get rid of them.
And the parasites, they probably irritate the fish, but they're doing us a bit of a service, because the fish jumps and you go,
you can't see yellow pop about it, don't you? Okay, so kind of the same sort of subject, your parasites and whatnot. Natural food at this point of the year in a lake, is it almost, I always picture, I could be totally wrong here, that by the time you get to the end of the winter, everything's kind of at its so it's reset stage almost.
Yeah, there's still natural food. So there will be bloodworm, for example.
Yes,
even harvesting the ponds on the farm in the last couple of weeks, as we've drained the water down and been wading about in the silt, there's loads of bloodworm in some of the ponds. So there's still bloodworm there, so still natural food there. And you've also potentially got zooplankton bloom, so Daphne or water fleas up in the water column, which the fish might well be feeding on as well. And that's hard. It's hard to imagine that a big carp, something like that, you can imagine it eating a water flea in mid-water, but a 30-pound carp or a 40-pound carp's a very big fish. It's hard to picture that going through a cloud of plankton and hoovering it up, but you're going to have to take my word for it.
Whales do.
They do. But they've got a very well-designed, feeding system to deal with that. It's hard to imagine a big carp doing that, but you have to take my word for it, having watched them do it over and over and over. They're literally going along, hoovering up the plankton mid-water. So.
And are there many varieties of natural food now coming to life in the spring, or not?
Snails. Yeah, there's a range of natural foods there, and obviously the carp will tap into whatever is specifically the most abundant in that environment. So if you're fishing a silty lake, it might be bloodworm. If it could be snails in a gravel pit, you might get a bloom of small snails in a gravel pit which they're going to eat. It might be baby crayfish. It could be pea mussels, caddis, shrimps. Whatever. Carp are brilliantly adapted, Elliott, to home in on what is the most easily available food source for the least amount of effort. A bit like us. We all love fast food, we all like chocolate bars because it's quick and easy. The fish are the same. They're not going to spend hours digging to try and find a bloodworm if they can go up onto a shallow area and find millions of snails. They'll go for the easy option.
And fly hatches are, you know, they're quite an exciting thing in the springtime. You know, you get the carp go wild. They're hard to catch, though, aren't they?
Yes, they're up in the water, and it's like we talked about with the zooplankton. You know, they're feeding mid-water, and that's where those guys that fish jig rigs and they really know what they're doing often catch them. Yeah.
What causes what causes those flies?
Those are insects coming out of the sediment, out of the benthos. They're coming up and they're coming towards the surface, and they hatch on the surface. So they come up, and of course in that stage they are very, very vulnerable. If you imagine you're a little invertebrate that's lived in the sediment amongst the rotting debris on the bottom of the lake, and you think, right, it's a nice sunny afternoon, I'm going to hatch. You've got to get to the surface, and then you're flying. And of course that stage from getting from the bottom to the surface with a little eat me tattooed on your forehead, you're going to get wolfed down it. Everything eats them.
And can we predict this as you know, whenever I've seen a fly hatch, you sit there and you go, oh my God, you see the birds come.
Everything.
You never expect it though. It's always, you know it will happen at some point.
Yeah.
Is there a way of...
I think it's a bit of experience, and different lakes react differently as well, but often warm weather in the spring is perfect, isn't it? You know, that lovely settled warm weather. I mean, it's interesting at the moment, although, again, going back to our lovely warm days, and when the viewers are watching this, we might have had a change in the weather, but at the moment it feels lovely in the day, but I'm not seeing much frog spawn yet. But if you think for those amphibians that are wanting to breed in really shallow water, they like to lay their eggs in water that sort of depth, that water at night, which is when they like to breed, because they don't like to do it in the middle of the afternoon because the heron has them.
Something will get eaten,
they tend to breed in the dark, in the nocturnal hours. They are very, very cold, aren't they? We're having hard frosts at night, so you know, the whole Mother Nature's well geared into those temperature shifts.
And everything, I'm assuming, wants it to just be warm as soon as possible.
Yeah, so I think we're not alone. Yeah.
Okay, so from fly hatches, you mentioned zig fishing.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. It's a good way of catching carp, isn't it? At this time
without
of year.
doubt, yeah. I'm a terrible zig rig fisherman, but
you've caught some nice ones, I'm pretty sure. How important would you say it would be to really think about the depth you're fishing your zigs? And I would say, I mean, I like zig fishing, always paid quite a lot of attention to it. Certainly in more recent years, you see a lot more people catching them. Zigging always, historically, I found, was always about being up in the water. It's not like that now.
No.
Some lakes, you hear loads are getting caught on zigs, you turn out and they're getting caught on 4-footers, 3-footers.
Yeah. I think the thing about zig rigs, which I think is why they are so devastatingly effective as an angling technique, is if you are a carp feeding on the bed of a lake, you are in a position where you can hold yourself absolutely static. You can control the suction with which you feed. You're probably, if it's in a clear gravel pit, you can see clearly, particularly if it's in shallow water, in bright light, you can see very, very clearly. They've got good colour vision. They're looking at every detail at the bottom. We already chatted a bit before we started filming about how small a speck they could see. You know, we know that they can see something virtually the size of a pinhead, you know, on clean substrate. So when they're feeding like that, any fine bits of your rig tuning that aren't perfect, you know, slightly blunt hook, too long a hook link, a badly presented bait, they don't take it, or they suck it up and they spit it back out. And if they get hooked, you know, we've both seen big fish shut rigs up, get hooked, and then just stay absolutely static, and the mouth goes like that for a second or two, and the hook falls out, and they carry on to the next bit of food. If you're zig rig fishing, it's straight up off that lead. That is a cruising fish. It's not going up to it and going, what's that, before it takes it. It's cruising along, suddenly something comes into view. What's that? So it just sucks it in, and before it's moving. It's like a massive submarine going through the water. It's got an inertia and momentum to it. It keeps moving, and the moment it sucks it in, that hook link is tightening, and before it thinks, oh, it's lifted the lead off the bottom, the hook's gone in, and you've got a bite. So I think, and having watched fish take zigs in crystal clear water in sort of 3 foot, you see them go up to them. They don't stop, they just carry on and just take them and carry on, and then they go off like a rocket. And I think that's the beauty of that technique. You know, there is no play, and it's a bit like when you fish a chod rig. You know, it's the same. There is no play. And
coiled spring.
Yeah, and that's the zig rigs for me is a killer if you can get the depth right and find the fish, because if they suck it in, they're nailed. And I know you read some of the articles you see of people that are very effective at catching zig rig on zigs, but You know, often they get the depth right, and then they catch real weird fish as well that never get caught in the bottom, but that makes perfect sense. So if you've got an old carp that's learnt the ropes, he's absolutely in immaculate condition, his mouth's perfect, so his feeding apparatus is absolutely perfect, it's feeding on the bottom, it can see the detail, it knows what the trap looks like, and it might suck it up, not spook, spit it back out. But in a zig rig fishing situation, that's a very different game. He sucks it in, and he don't get a split second, he's hooked. So yeah, I think it's a great method.
All his practice that did make perfect goes out the window.
Yeah, it's very hard to learn that trick.
What about size of zig baits? I spoke to my mate yesterday. I said, I'm going out with Scotty. What questions do you want to ask him now?
No.
And this is one he mentioned, and interestingly, it's something that, you know, same with you. I talk to so many carp anglers doing the job I do. I know one in particular does very well on 15mm pop-ups, which to a lot of people, I think the classic, like, you get the experienced zig angler who uses little bits of foam, and then, you know, his mate might have a go and he whacks a 15mm pop-up on, and you think, oh, that's not
never
how you do
gonna
it.
go.
They always catch them though, don't they?
Yeah.
And actually, another friend of mine, he was catching them on, I think it was 35 or 40mm pop-ups on zigs. So massive, you know, and in the spring, we go fishing with 15, 16mm pop-ups, we cast them at a showing fish. You wouldn't cast 8mm pop-ups at the showing fish as confidently as you would a 16mm.
You'll miss it.
Is it the same on a zig? Do you
I think so, yeah. But again, if you're a carp, a big carp, obviously not like little doubles, but if you're a big carp and you